Hi, I'm Ian and welcome back to Astro Time Traveller. In this episode I'm going to show you how you put different parts on the Sky-Watcher Esprit 120ED to either do visual imaging or to take images with a DSLR camera or a one-shot colour camera. If you saw my recent unboxing video, I showed you me taking out some of the parts that come with the telescope and some of the additional parts I bought to go with the telescope. And I promised I'd come back and show you those in a bit more detail. So I'm going to do that in this video, so stay tuned to see how to do visual and imaging with the Esprit 120ED. So just before I start showing you the different parts to go on the telescope, I thought one thing I should show you is something I didn't show the other day, which is actually the lens on the front of the telescope. So if I take the lens cap off here at the front, and if I carefully hold this up, hopefully you can see the lens in there, which is really good and really strong and really powerful, because it gets me to, I think I've got to 863 millimeters of focal length. Which is really good for this size telescope. It's meant to be 840, but I seem to have got a little bit more. And also, one of the key things to do is to make sure, if you want to extend the dew shield. And again, you untighten the bolts at the front and then just tighten them back up once you've extended it. And I have had this extended when I was using the telescope on the first 3 nights. So when you do that, that obviously puts a bit of weight to the front, and when I add imaging cameras at the back, it will put weight at the back. So those are some of the areas you just need to watch out for when you're doing that. If you see here, I actually moved the tube rings. So when it came out of the box, the tube rings were a bit further spaced apart, but I narrowed them a little bit more because I wanted to be able to put my ZWO 280mm guide scope on top of the telescope, which I've now been able to do. So that sits really nicely on top and therefore can track the stars together with my ZWO 120mm guide camera. So now that's all kind of set up. So what I'll do now is I'll just swivel it around to help show a bit easier. But what I want to do is show you how to attach on the back here the different elements to do visual and then imaging with this telescope. So if we're doing visual imaging, I guess the first thing we want to do is put on the finder scope. So this comes with the Esprit 120, and it attaches to this dovetail plate here, and it looks really nice. It's really solid, and you can look through at the top there. You can move that around with the element that it has. So if we attach that like this, and obviously what you should do is do that in the daylight, then use that to focus on something in the distance, maybe a telegraph pole or something that's distant. Get it really centered up so that you know, and then focus your lens, and then you know when you come in the evening to focus on a star or a planet and you're using the finder scope to do that, that will work and it will be okay to get you into that alignment. Now the next thing, if we want to actually use visual, is probably to put the dovetail on, and this is a really heavy one. It's can do both 2-inch and 1/4 inch. So first thing we just need to do is take off the back of this, and you've got a place to put in the dovetail. So that can go straight in there, and then just tighten up the attaching screws, and obviously you can move it around to a different direction if you need to. And then on this particular one, I'm going to take off this, which is for the smaller eyepiece, because we don't need that. Just put that to one side over here. But what they do give you is this, which is the 2-inch eyepiece. So again, all we need to do is put that down into the dovetail. If that's tightened up, it wasn't tightened up. And then we can put that down in, and hey presto, tighten that up, and then we're ready for visual usage, and of course you can change that angle of attack if you want to. So that's pretty straightforward and pretty easy to set up and ready to go. Now what I tend to do is I don't do visual, I'm mostly doing imaging with my one-shot colour camera. So what I'll do now is I'll go back to where we started, I'll take this off, and then I'll show you what to do if you want to put a DSLR camera on. I haven't used DSLR with this yet, so I haven't proved what I'm about to show you actually works, but this is what the manual says should be the setup for the DSLR, and I'll show you what that looks like.
So here are the extensions, or the single extension I used from the back of the telescope to the field flattener. And you can see this is the element here, which is a 74mm thread on the telescope side, moving down to a 65mm thread on the flattener side. And literally just put that on the telescope and then you can attach the flattener straight to it. But you can also add in this piece, which is the filter cell that I bought. Doesn't come with the telescope, you buy it separately. And again, that has a 65mm thread on both sides, but in the center here you can put a 2-inch filter in. So I haven't used that yet, but I'll just show you in the video. I'll show you how to attach that, I think, towards the end of the video. So you can put that in, but generally the main thing is just to attach those two. The field corrector has a front end which is 65mm that goes to the telescope side, and on the rear side that goes towards the camera side it's 62mm. So you're starting at 62 here when you start to add attachments for cameras, etc.
Well, actually, I think the first thing I'll do before I put the DSLR on is show you what happens when we put the flattener on, the field corrector for the 120. So to do that, we need to put this piece on, which is going to fit onto the end here. So I'll put in the description all these parts, but this comes with the telescope. So we take off the initial cover, and then I think this is a 74mm, bring it down to 65. So this, as you can see, that's it there. Hopefully you can see that. This goes on the end, and then once that's on, I can then add the reducer. Now I'll come back in a little while and show you that I actually have also a piece that can go into the reducer to put in a filter if I wish to in the reducer. But let me just show you this added on to start with. So if we take the end off here and we screw on, it's not the reducer, it's a flattener. So that's now the flattener fully on board, and what that enables to do is get a really good wide field of view where you've got crisp round stars right out to the edges of your field of view. And on the 3 nights I've used the telescope so far and using the flattener, I really have got good stars, and I'll show you an image at the end of the video that shows you that I think this is really working well. So that's the starting point before I either put on a DSLR or before I put on my one-shot colour camera. So now we're set up, now we're ready to put on the DSLR, so I'll do that next.
So this is the setup you might need for a DSLR camera. So I haven't used this yet, I haven't done any photography with DSLR with this telescope, but this is what I think you might need. Now, if you're starting with, we're coming back from behind the field flattener, the corrector, so that will be over here, and then all these pieces are to get you to the 75mm or back focus. And the first one, which comes with the telescope, is the 15mm thick extension, which kind of is 62mm on both sides. And then you have this one, which is the attachment to that, which brings it down from 62mm to M48 or T2. And then you can add on to that part 3, which is the T-ring for the Canon DSLR. So the 3 of those together come to about 31mm of distance, and then within the actual DSLR, in this case the Canon EOS Rebel T3i, from the front of the camera to the sensor within the camera is 44mm. So adding all those together should get you to 75mm is the back focus. Now there is the opportunity to add a filter within this piece here. The attachment has ability to do that. You can put a 2-inch filter within there to have that within your train between the flattener and your camera sensor for a DSLR. And I'll just show you how all of this is attached in a second.
So for the DSLR, what we need is a couple of pieces. In particular, we're looking for the pieces that will give us the right length between the back of the Flattener and the front of the DSLR. In my particular case, I'm using the Canon EOS Rebel T3i, and that has, I believe, 44 millimeters within the camera of backspace. So if I need 75 millimeters backspace in total from the back of the Flattener to the sensor, and I've got 44 here, I need 31 in front of the camera. So the elements you get here, there's two pieces that come, and I've actually got them stuck together. I can't take them apart, but there's an extender here which I think is about 15 millimeters, and also then what fits into that extender is something to bring down to fit onto, I think, a 48 millimeter or T2 T-ring. So this now attaches to the back of the Flattener, and this will be used for both the DSLR, or if we are equally using the one-shot color camera. So I won't need to take this off when I'm changed from DSLR, but what I do need to do is now add my T-ring. So if I just put that on, and obviously that's a T-ring for the Canon. So got that on, and then what I can do, the good thing here is you can change around the exact spacing of where you want things and then tighten them up. So I'm just going to put it to about there, I think, and then we'll tighten this back up. There we go. And then what I can do is I should be able to fit the DSLR. There we go. So we can move around a bit more. And there we are. So that should be the right focal length. Now I've got a gadget over here to measure that with. So if I just switch that on and put it back to 0, and then measuring in centimeters from the back of the focal, the Flattener to the front of the telescope, I'm measuring, you can just get that about right. I'm measuring about 32 millimeters. So it's a little bit above the 31 I wanted, or maybe I haven't tightened everything as, yeah, I could tighten those a little bit more, but it should be 31 plus the 44 to get you 75 millimeters from the back of the Flattener. So as I said, I haven't tried the DSLR yet, but that's how it should be set up. So now what I'll do is I'll move on and change from the DSLR to a one-shot color camera.
So these are the elements I've used in my first 3 nights of imaging to use my one-shot color camera, the ZWO ASI294MC Pro. And effectively over on the left-hand side we will have the Flattener, and these are the attachments from the Flattener to, on the right-hand side, the camera and the camera sensor. And what I'm really using is the same with the DSLR for the first 2 pieces, which is that 15mm extension at 62 millimeters thread, and then the second piece that brings that 62 millimeters down to 48 millimeters. And in my particular case, I use the ZWO 2-inch filter drawer, which I think has a width of about 21 centimeters. So I use my Optolong L-Extreme filter in that. And then on the thread of that, on the camera side, I then use just one of the 1mm Bada 48mm adjustment rings. And then attached to that, I use this, which is the one I highlighted in the video, which is really useful, which is a 48 female to 42 male adapter. So the female side goes and attaches to the filter drawer, because I have it at 48 millimeters on the camera side. And then the 42 millimeters on the camera side of this, I then start attaching my extension tubes. But actually with the extension tubes at both ends, I've put in 2 of these, which are the adapter insert rings moving a 48 millimeter extension down to 42 millimeters, so it can both attach to this but also attach to the camera end as well. So these have no additional length because they go inside the actual extension tubes, but that extension tube I'm using about 15 millimeters. I used a couple there of 5 and 10. And then right on the camera side, I've got a couple of spacers that I think gave me about 1 millimeter of length. So if I added all of those together, I got to about, on paper, I get to about 68 millimeters. But when you actually screw them on, you sometimes end up with slightly different. I think I was closer to 69. So I think in the actual imaging, I was slightly over 75 millimeters, whereas mathematically here, it looks like we would come out being slightly less than 75. So what I would normally do if this was totally correct, I'd add another 0.5 millimeter adjustment ring somewhere in the chain to get to that. Now, one of the other things to note is that this particular piece here, number 2, has the ability to take a filter within it, a 2-inch filter. So I don't really need to use the filter drawer. So if that were the case, then I would take that out and use a longer extension tube between the telescope end and the camera end to replace the 21 millimeters I would lose from that. So I haven't tried that, but I will try that soon to see what that looks like and see how effective that is to do that. But that's the pieces I've used, and I'll now show you in the video how I put all of those on the telescope.
So for that, let's just take off the DSLR. So take that back. We can put the lens back onto the actual camera, put that to one side. And then I don't need the T-ring, so I can take the T-ring off of here. Actually, it's taken the end off of the piece that was stuck before, which is good. So actually now I've taken the, that always happens with these things. So that's the T-ring off. And then this was the extender. I was showing you these two were together before, but I'll just show you. So that's the 15mm extender, and then that's what goes into the extender to then give you a bit more focal backspace, and then we'll put on the attachment to put on my one-shot color camera. So again, we're just going back from the beginning. So all we've got here is the flattener, and then we add the extender at the back of the flattener, and then we add this piece that just gives a little bit more. It's reducing each time, I think, from 74 to 65 or 62 down to 48. And then what I use with my one-shot color camera is I actually am using a filter wheel here. I'm using a filter drawer, which is the ZWO. So that attaches to this piece. So I've now got my filter in there. And then finally I've got my one-shot color camera. And again, that needs to fit. Just be careful to do that. So I've got a few extensions. So you just need different extensions. I think they're 48mm to ultimately get to that 75 back focus. So in this one-shot color camera, which is the 294MC Pro, I've got 6.5mm between the front of the camera and the actual sensor. So 6.5 off 75. I need 68.5 millimeters before the camera. So if I now measure this from the, just start again, if I measure this from the front of the back of the flattener to the front of the camera, and what I'm getting, let's just get that close on. Ooh. So I'm getting 69, so I'm 69 plus 6.5, I'm 75.5. So again, I could tighten those probably a little bit more. I've got an extension ring in there with 1mm, so I could change that for one that's smaller than that. But that should give him the 75mm back focus. And this is what my setup was with the first 3 nights I used the telescope, and I got really good sharp stars right out to the corner. And again, the good thing with this is you can move this round. So as you've probably seen in previous videos of mine, I use the bubbles on the end of my camera to try and get the field of view. So again, with the dial that you can use at the front, I can move that round to get my bubble flat at the bottom, if that's where I want it, and then tighten it up, and then I know I'm in the right place for the imaging that I want. So this is pretty much how I image and how I've imaged so far, and it's worked really well. The other thing I use is obviously the ASI Air Pro in my case, and what I do is I attach that onto the dovetail. So it can't go all the way through because of the elements here holding the telescope, but it's on us sufficiently enough, and then that sits there, and I attach it all to the whole process. So that powers my cooler on the camera, powers the camera, powers my guide camera, etc., and my heater on the front of the camera. And then I just put some dew straps around and I'm ready to go. So that's pretty much everything. The only last thing I was going to show you was the element where I bought to put a filter actually in the front of the flattener. So if that's the case, then instead of having the filter drawer here, I need to replace that by a few more extensions. So I won't do that this particular time, but that's what you need to do. Just make sure you have sufficient extensions to go in there. And one of the things I do have, which I find really useful, and I'll put a bit of detail in there, is this piece that sits on the front of this particular set of cameras, which is a piece that is both a male and a female M48, which is useful to make sure you're attaching all those pieces through. But what I'll show you now is I'll just very quickly show you, if I take the flattener off, and obviously all of these you need to clean very carefully and make sure there's no dust when you're actually setting up for imaging. If I take the flattener off, here is the cell I have that puts in a filter, and here I've got a filter. So this is a 2-inch filter, 2-inch cell. So this will sit in front of the flattener, and the filter goes in the middle of that. So if I just screw the filter in, I'll just show you how all this works. So that's the filter going in there. Then that filter goes onto the front of the flattener, and then the flattener will attach back again onto the telescope. So just giving it a catch, there we go. And then again, my camera will, let's just get that right, my camera will go back onto all of this. Just connect them up. I shouldn't have taken that apart, should I? But there we go. So we'll just make sure that it's tightened. There we go. So now, obviously, as I said, I've got the filter drawer in there, so you don't really want that. You just need the extensions. But now I've got a filter at the front, and I don't know what that will do with the exact focusing, but it might change the focusing a little bit. And the one thing to note was when I originally set all of this up, I had the focus drawer all the way in, and what I found to get actual focus with the setup I used, which wasn't the filter here, but just the filter there, was my focus here is at 8.2 on a scale that's here. So that brought the focus drawer quite a bit further back, and therefore I had to rebalance the telescope on my mount because it was putting more weight at the back of the telescope. So that just took a little bit to do. So when you saw my original video where you see it set up, I actually moved it slightly further back than that to get perfect balance. But that's it, and hopefully I'll show you the different things you need to add to do either physical visual view through the telescope, or imaging with a DSLR, or the one-shot colour camera here using my ZWO ASI294MC Pro. So hopefully that's all been helpful. What I'll do is I'll show an image at the end of this. I think it'll probably be the Elephant Trunk Nebula that I took using this, I think on my second night out. And on my third night, I've combined 2 nights together of the Elephant Trunk to show you what a really class piece of equipment I think the Sky-Watcher Esprit 120ED is turning out to be. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you've enjoyed this. I'm getting close to 500 subscribers, so a few more and I'll be there. So thank you for those who have subscribed, and thank you for those who've watched me throughout the year. I started this YouTube channel back at the beginning of the year with highlights of last year, and I've really found it fun doing, and hopefully I've explained some of the things that I do, and hopefully that will help other people to do this great hobby as well. So until we meet the next time, have a happy holidays coming up and clear skies.